Hello, we're the Lorcana Twins, and we are back. It's been a while, but we are excited about the direction Lorcana is going and about making content, and we plan to do it regularly with our new format, Lorcana Twins Talk. So as you can see, this is episode number 1, and I am Lorcana Twin 1, or Aaron, and who are you?
I'm Lorcana Twin 2, also known as Wade, and I am his twin brother, as might be evident from our little title there. But yeah, we're back again, and we know you missed us, so you're welcome. We're here, but we're just gonna have some fun talking about Lorcana. We've got a new set coming up. We just had a bunch of set championships over the past month or so, and it's been a good time. So we're just kind of here to talk about all things Lorcana.
Yep. So if you're new to the channel or it's been a while, just thought we'd do a little bit about us in regards to our TCG history. So really didn't play too many TCGs growing up, just dabbled a little bit in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh when they came out, but nothing serious, more so on the collecting side. And we did play about a decade's worth of Hearthstone off and on, so that was really a digital game, but still it really taught us a lot of the card game fundamentals and a lot of fun there. But yeah, when we learned of this game, we got instantly hooked, and we started following any little news thing that we could find about it. And for about, I'd say, the 8 months leading up to its release, we were really good about that and started making content and had a lot of fun. And then we were just about as obsessed with it as you could be, in a good way. And when it released, it has lived up to all of our expectations and more. So it's been a blast. And yeah,
It really has.
Yep, we ended up playing in some early tournaments too, and I somehow managed to win a 280 player event, which took me by surprise. But I know we've done a lot of research into the game and stayed up on the meta, so we definitely practiced a lot. But I just never expected that with this being one of our first really serious in-person TCGs. But then you had a really impressive showing in a tournament soon after that, getting second in a huge tournament. And then when the DLC circuit came out, we'd really never done any huge traveling for games either. But
Yeah, we decided to do that for this game because we were really all in on this game, I guess you could say. And so we went to Atlanta since that was the first one. We were super excited to go there. And I know we both did pretty well there. I decided to play an Amethyst Emerald deck.
Yep.
And that was really fun at the time, being able to, double sing Mother Knows Best with
back
Ursula
in set 3.
and friends on the other side. But I guess I tied the amount of points you needed to make day 2, but my tiebreakers weren't good enough, so I did get to let it go.
I believe I was one game away from the let it go, perhaps, and
it's a little disappointing not to make day 2 there just because I was so close, but it was really fun, and it was our first time doing something like that.
Yeah, and getting to meet everyone there was crazy cool. I think there were at least or close to 2,000 players there, so that was incredible to see. The venue was a lot of fun, and I know it was the first big event, but overall it ran pretty smoothly despite a little maybe technical hiccups. But yeah, it was so much fun, and it really just fueled us to want to do more. So
yeah, because it's one thing to hear about the hype of when you're just online, talking to people and thinking, there's some people interested in this game, but when you actually get to a place like that and see the room just so packed, it really was an experience.
Yeah, and I know locally, we have a good local scene now, but back then and earlier on, we didn't know as many people, and it's just cool to see that there's so many people, around the world, really, that are as passionate about this game as we are, and that just makes it a lot of fun when you get everyone together. So, yeah.
And our next DLC, we went to Chicago, and I know the Green Steel Bucky deck was very popular at the time. So
I ended up playing 6 of them out of the 9 rounds, so, that was one of my least favorite matchups, and I didn't have too much fun with that, but the event overall is still a blast.
I went there playing Amber Ruby Mufasa. I really didn't like almost any deck in that set, and I had no idea what to do, so I just kind of, the morning of the event, just switched to that and decided to have some fun with it, and kind of built the deck quick on the fly. And then I was really surprised to qualify for day 2 with that list, but then I proceeded to immediately get destroyed by a Green Steel Bucky deck in the first round of day 2. And I think I was seed 10, so I did get to be on the play both games, but I got O2'd pretty horribly. So,
and then moving on from there, we did one other DLC. We went to Las Vegas, which was a lot of fun. I ended up playing Amber Steel there, which is one of my favorite decks to play. It can be pretty hot and cold sometimes depending on your draws, but started really strong with the 2-0 and then split in round 3 against Red Blue, which I was happy to do because that's not always a great matchup. Throughout the rest of the day, I got into round 7 needing to 2-0 the rest of the way out, and I ended up splitting in round 7. So I knew it was kind of over from there, but again, just always a blast to play big events. And you were still in it, though, fighting to the last round.
Yeah, I played Amethyst Emerald again because I really like that deck generally. And
it had changed a bit since set 3. Now it had, the Clarabelle shift line.
Yeah, and Clarabelle I was really high on. Like, I think she's what made the deck feel really playable into some of those control matchups. And I know Red Blue was pretty popular at the time. I don't think my deck, I didn't build it aggressively enough. I should have played more Merfolks and Bonsais because I saw a lot of Red Blue that day. And yeah, going into round 9 of day 1, I had to 2-0 to make day 2. And I won the first game. I think I was even on the draw for the first game. So, I was feeling good going into the last one. But I just did not get a very aggressive start, and the Sapphire Ruby player had just kind of a perfect curve, and I think they played 3 Maleficent Dragons on me in a row, and just destroying every Clarabelle I tried to play. So that game, unfortunately, was a split, and so we each got Let It Go, but did not make day 2.
So yeah, you ended up getting a Let It Go at every DLC you went to.
I did.
Which was very impressive. And
it felt like I would never have expected it, but I was pleased with the results.
But yeah, I think, we're definitely looking forward to the next round of DLCs, assuming there will be some. And I know the community is too, just waiting on any announcements about that. And of course, the World Championships will be happening sometime, hopefully soon.
Yeah, it was really fun watching the Continental Championships and also just seeing the recent DLC in Australia. So I'm really excited to see kind of Worlds because it's fun. We've been following a lot of the players for quite some time, and I'm very curious what everyone's going to bring, and especially we don't know exactly when it's going to be, so how many sets are going to be out at that time.
That is definitely something, though, that depending on the announcement and if our schedule allows, we would love to at least attend the Worlds and be a part of the first one. I think that'd be pretty epic. But yeah, so that's a little bit about our history so far in Lorcana, and now we have just gotten through a set champ season for this, Scar Heartless Hunter promo card over there. I really love the art of this card.
Yeah, I think it's awesome.
So yeah, I was excited to play in tournaments and try to win this and the mat, of course. But we ended up playing 5 events this time, and the first one, I played Sapphire Steel, because I played a lot of that in set 3 and I'd went away from it for a while, and I know this set too, it wasn't really seeing a ton of results or maybe a ton of play, but there's another creator called Rip Lungs or Create TCG, and I saw his list that he used at the North American Last Chance qualifier event that he was able to win all 5 rounds with, and I really like the look of the list and I love to play Sapphire Steel, so I thought I'd go with that, and I was able to make top 4 with that, and then I was in a game 3 against Amber Steel, and they kind of ran me over before I could ramp out into some of my bigger removal characters. But overall, I was very pleased with that and had a fun time. And you played?
I decided to play Amber Amethyst, and it was a Mufasa list. I saw it had been published by, I believe, Diego Sass. And he's won a DLC, so I definitely trust his opinions on card selection. And I made a few changes to it just because I usually like to modify things a little bit. But that day, I think all 4 rounds I played against some steel decks, and there was just a lot of Zeus happening. I wasn't able to keep my board as wide as I would have liked, but I won the first 2 rounds, and then I did draw against my brother intentionally, and we really didn't calculate it out that we kind of needed to win 3 times no matter what because we were cutting straight to top 4. So we probably shouldn't have drawn there because then it just meant we both had to win our final round.
But the funny thing is we actually played for fun anyways, and we did split, and then we only had 5 minutes left. So they were grindy games.
I think we would have had to get started a little sooner because we kind of debated what we should do. But then my last round, I was against Amethyst Steel, and there was one too many Zeuses and Genies happening, and I really didn't have answers for the evasive. So I took a 1-2 loss there and got seated in 5th. And since we cut to top 4, that was kind of the end of the run for me. But still fun to pick up a Scar card on the first set champs we did.
Yep. And then the next weekend we did 2 events, so event 2 and 3 for us, and we both decided last minute to run the same exact deck, and we're going to share that list with you here at the end of our set champ recap. That was probably my favorite deck we played, it was an Amber Steel Mufasa list.
Yeah, I hadn't had enough of Mufasa from the previous, weekend, so decided to just change the flavor of it a little bit, because after so much steel, I kind of wanted to be the one doing the steel cards and, removing things. That's always fun.
Yeah, and we've always loved Amber Steel, like I said earlier, but this was just a different flavor with the Mufasa and some more aggressive, like bigger bodied characters throughout. And so when we saw the list, it looked like a lot of fun. So yeah, we took that to the event, and I was able to reach the top 4 with that, where I ended up playing Jeebus, who is well known within the community, in that top 4, and he was on Ruby Sapphire, and I ended up losing on the draw and then winning on the play, and then I was on the draw for game 3 as well, because he was the number 1 seed and got to go first if he so chose, and who doesn't want to go first in Lorcana, at least right now. And yeah, I think in that matchup it does help a lot. And then I did think it was funny, he got so many of the human Sisus to remove. I think I had triple Daisy going on. I thought, well, maybe this is my only hope, But he got a lot of those Sisus, and then my Daisy gave him the big shift Sisu as well, so I got demolished, but it was a fun time anyway.
Always fun when you can see what cards are coming up later, to be played against you when you give it to them with Daisies.
But top 4 I was really happy with again, and then you actually made top 4 and won against Ruby Amethyst, and then got to also play Jeebus in the final.
So I played Jeebus in the final, and I also took a 1-2 loss. He was the top seed, so he did get to go, be on the play twice. And I did win on the draw, but even the game I won on the draw was very close. Like, I had 2 characters in play. One was a Piglet, and I needed to top deck a playable, character to perfectly get enough lore, and I needed him not to draw any removal, and somehow that happened. So he was going to win the next turn if I didn't. So it was a pretty fun finish to game 2. But yeah, game 3 just kind of got ran over by a bunch of Sisus.
But yeah, I liked how, with as popular as Ruby Sapphire's been this set, that the Mufasa list for Amber Steel kind of felt like it had some good game into it anyway, if things curved out well, because I know traditional Amber Steel sometimes can have a rougher go. So I felt like at least having the Daisy and Piglet and Lawrence type of lines, as we'll see later when we show the list, was kind of fun and just made me feel better about entering the tournament with it. And then, yeah, I had so much fun with the deck that I played it at the 3rd event we did as well. And in round 5, I needed to win to make the top 8, and I ended up winning a very close game 3 against Ruby Sapphire. And I was on the play, 2 of those 3 games, and I won those 2 games I was on the play. So again, it really seemed to help out in the matchup. So I was able to get the top 8, and then I lost there to Amethyst Steel, and that was the only opponent I think that I'd lost to in the Swiss rounds, and I had to play him again. So my expectations weren't too high, but I gave it my best, and we had a couple really close, grindy games that almost ran out of the time just in those 2 games. But again, it was really fun. I was glad I played the list again, and you played.
I switched to Amethyst Emerald, which I hadn't really played much of this set, but I was kind of liking the potential as long as you don't see too much steel. And I ended up, I think I was 2-0, and then I had a couple of rough rounds where, especially, I was 1-1 against a Diggy Hole deck, and I was on the play for the last game, and I really liked my hand if I could just have a 1-drop, and I was playing 16 1-drops, and I had a Snake ready to go to kind of get above a Cinderella, and then I could curve out from there. But I mulliganed 5, and I still couldn't find the 1, and then they played Cinderella on 2.
That's tough,
and then I drew a 1-drop on my second turn, which they proceeded to banish my character immediately. So they kind of ran away with it, but it was still fun nonetheless. And then my final round, which I needed to win to make top 8, was against a Ruby Sapphire, and I just did not find the aggressive line in game 3. So I did lose the first game on the play, and that felt bad, because then I thought, well, now I know I have to win on the draw as well. Game 2 was pretty easy for me, since I found 3 merfolks pretty early, but even then, still towards the late game, it was kind of hard to get to 20. I almost thought they might stop me, so then I wasn't really confident, knowing how aggressive my start was, and it still felt a little dicey at the end. So game 3, I didn't have much confidence, and it turned out kind of how I expected. But yeah, I guess when they had maybe a couple Maui Sharks in play, and I got Pirate's Life 3 times, so I think I was at 14 and then went down to 8 and, got maybe to 12 by the end of it, but just kind of hard to finish it off. And they get a lot of lore off those sharks too. So, but it was fun, but I kind of thought at that point I didn't feel as good about Amethyst Emerald as maybe I had in the past. So I kind of shied away from that for the rest of the set champ season.
So then we had one more weekend where we did events, so our 4th and 5th set champ event, and I guess this set I had played, at least in practice and just for fun, against my brother and locally. I'd been playing the most of Amethyst Steel and Blurple, as I like to call it. So I thought, well, I haven't done those yet at set champs, and I really wanted to give them a try. So I took Blurple to the 4th event and had a rough couple of first rounds that were pretty close, but I think I started 1-1 and then went down 1-2. I think my opponent top decked a White Rose for the win in a very close game 3. It was crazy because I tried to set it up so Go-Go wouldn't be enough, but then they had a Go-Go plus a White Rose. So that was really close and fun, though. That was against a local friend. And so then I thought I need to win out to have any chance, and I did end up winning the next 2 rounds, but as it happened, it was just a little bit shy of being able to break into the top 8. And then what did you play?
So I played a Sapphire Steel deck. It was kind of more aggressively skewed, but it also used Hiram, and it used I think 6 of the Popsicle / Fortisphere type items, and then it had a lot of removal. So I think there were a couple Grab Your Sword, a couple Let It Go, and then also some Along Came Zeus. So I think this was more like trying to curve out nice and then use your 4-cost characters to sing Zeus and your 5-cost to sing Let It Go, and then also drop some McDuck Manners on people and just try to control the board that way. And
that has definitely made a resurgence.
It topped out with Tinkerbell, but there was no whole new world, so it was... And Cogsworth was in there as well, so I think it was kind of built to try to do nicely against other steel decks. And for the most part, I thought it was super fun. It played almost like a blue version of, Amber Steel songs, which was pretty cool. And Calhoun seems so strong right now in the meta, so it was fun getting to play her as well in that deck. And so I made top 4, and then I lost 1-2 in top 4 against a Diggy Hole deck, which seems to be just the bane of my set champs experience. I almost always get eliminated by that. I did have... They just kind of got under me with a wide board and then played Kita, and because of that I could not remove things even though I had a great board set up for challenging. So they just got to quest twice in my face and win. I tried to threaten the win the following turn, and I removed enough stuff so they couldn't quite win, but all they had to do was get rid of one of my things, and then I was going to lose the race. So just kind of unfortunate for me how that one played out, but it showed the power of Kita, and I've always really liked that card, and it's just kind of funny when you need to challenge but you really can't.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool legendary card, and as long as you're not against Ruby decks, I think it's great against things that need to challenge and they don't have rush. But
so yeah, that was really fun. That actually might have felt like the funnest deck that I played over the 5 ones that we did, and I kind of wanted to run it back, but I decided to switch my deck every time for this set champ, so I never really let myself play the same thing twice. But of all the ones I played, I think that's the one I would have wanted to try again.
And then for the last one, I switched to that Amethyst Steel that I mentioned, and I played a list that had the Tinkerbell shift line in it, and I really did like that, and I'd been having fun playing that earlier on in the set, so I thought, sure, I'll give that a try. And the evasive 2 questers is nice on 3, and then when you run out of Genie on 4, maybe they brought your Tinkerbell and now they don't have it for Genie, and if they just miss it entirely, then you could start running away with questing for 2 evasively that they can't touch. So I think that's really nice, but I think against Ruby Sapphire it's not so great because a lot of it is brawlable. Even the human Sisu or the shift Sisu, it's all gonna take it out pretty easily. So I also I started out 2-0, so it was pretty strong. Then I got matched into my brother here, and usually we just decide to draw against each other, but this time we thought, well, one of us will win and be guaranteed top 8, so we played it out, and you were on Blurple.
I was on Blue-Purple.
And I wasn't super excited to go against that with Amethyst Steel, just from the practice I had done against it, but I gave it my best, and I think you kind of ran away with it toward the end of game 1, but it was pretty grindy. And then game 2, I was at 19 lore, and I had a chance to draw a goat or a bounce or a way to remove my goat, like a Zeus, to go from 19 to 20. But the top of the deck did not want to provide, and so that's all right. But we only had about 5 minutes left in the round, so if I had won, then we really would have drawn anyway. But so you ended up taking it 2-0 over me. That was close. So then I won my 4th round and was sitting 3-1, so I thought I would be able to probably draw the last round and get in, but my opponent needed to play based on tiebreakers. So I played it out, and I knew they were on Ruby Sapphire, so I wasn't, super excited about that. But I do like to play, so that's what I'm there to do. So thought I'd give it my best, and yeah, I think the build of the deck that I was on with the Tinkerbells that weren't so hot into the matchup, and then I only had 2 rabbits, which wasn't great, and only 2 Zeus, so not a lot of outs to the Maui Shark. So yeah, they did get that shark down in both games, and that kind of just really put the brakes on what I was able to do. But I did get 18 lore both games, so it was very close, but it just wasn't quite enough. So I just narrowly missed out on the top 8 by finishing 3-2. And you were able to get into top 8.
Yep, I was 3-0. So then I just drew into the finals for the next 2 rounds. And in top 8, I played against a local friend, and they were on Diggy Hole. So you might guess how this went for me, just because I tend to lose to that. But I was on the draw for game 1, and that felt pretty bad. But I was able to claw the board back, and I had I'd removed everything they had in play, and then they had no hand, and they were on 19, so that's pretty sketchy. But I had an Elsa in hand, and some ways to control the board, and I was going to quest out in, I think, 2 turns to try to win from there. So I was actually feeling pretty confident that I could finish, but they had already played 2 Baloos and gotten 4 lore out of that. And, with no hand, I just thought, well, I don't know how many Baloos you might play, but what are the odds? We're not very far into your deck. And then top deck, a Baloo right there. So I'm like, now I need a Hades or the big Elsa to freeze. I only had the Rush one, and I couldn't draw into that. So they got game 1. And then game 2, I won. I felt like it was a lot easier on the play. I mean, they still got to 12 lore. So, it's always kind of scary how fast like a Diggy Hole deck can go, even when you're kind of trying to be the one controlling the tempo, but game 2 felt a lot better just being on the play. And then on the draw for game 3, that was just pretty much a blowout. I think it was about as bad as it could have gone for me. So I don't think any of my characters for the first few turns got to stick around due to Cinderella and just a couple different strengths and stuff. So, but overall, it was a really fun experience. I always enjoy trying to make the top cut and fight to make each successive round just to get to play more games, because it's really fun just playing the game, and I love the competition aspect. So yeah, it was a successful round of set champs. We got quite a lot of Scar promo cards, and I picked up a runner-up playmat. So I really like the art, as we said before, and it's always fun to try to collect at least one for the collection.
Yeah, so now we'll just briefly share that list that we both played for the event. So we will probably be disappearing here briefly while the list overtakes that. And
yeah, this was the list we did for our second set champs.
And shout out to Caden Wood, who we saw use this list at a set champ himself to great result, and just really liked the look of the list and threw it together last minute.
It was like the morning of the event. I was kind of like not sure what I wanted to play, and this was one of 2 options I had found, and
I think it really worked out for the tournament we entered and what everyone else was on at that tournament. I liked how there were 8 1-drops, which there were a lot of games where I couldn't find a 1-drop on one, which didn't end up being too detrimental. I think the quality of some of these characters that you curve out are just so good and worth a lot of lore that, obviously you would prefer to have a 1-drop. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world. I really liked in certain matchups to, if you can find that Cindy with the song, to kind of do what traditional Steel Song does and remove some things early. But Cinderella really in this deck is the only character that sings above her cost level. So
I do believe there's also...
It doesn't feel as much like Steel Song in that regard, but...
I noticed in the 2-drop slots, there's no Calhoun, and, you could play Calhoun in a list like this. I think she's just really good into a lot of decks, but there were 17 uninkables, I think,
Yep.
in this list, and I did definitely notice that when playing. It felt super heavy, so you had to kind of be careful how you were curving out.
It was fun trying to navigate that though, and I think like it never. I mean, there was a game I can recall where it really did impact. I was still able to win, but it really. I almost had a turn where I did nothing, which you definitely don't want to be doing. But yeah, mostly the uninkables, we were able to work around them.
Yep.
With
I
some
guess
cycle.
the only things that sometimes I got in a spot where I had a dock and a Perdita and I was on 5 ink and I was like, please, John, ink, because I really want to play this Perdita. And then maybe I do an uninkable, and I couldn't just play, the dock. I felt like I had to play the dock to progress my game state, basically. And so, sometimes I had to lose a Perdita, and she felt like an amazing card to play in this deck. But for the most part, it ran really smoothly, and, I think it was built in such a clever way.
Yeah, and I think the Perdita is what really excited me about playing this list, because I feel like she came out in set 3 and I really hadn't played her at any serious events, but she seemed like such a cool card.
Especially with the dock combo, just pulling your dock
that combo
back,
was so much fun.
so that even if your hand is kind of run out, she can pull dock back.
Like if you try to get a dock out early and then make sure that it's banished, so that when you play Perdita, if you just ink to 6 and she's your last card, then you get to replay dock from your discard, and then because you have no cards in hand, you don't have to discard anything, but you draw 2 more, and you just developed a 1/6.
And if they don't remove Perdita, you can quest the next turn and pull another thing back. Sometimes you have multiple docks.
Right, so Perdita just helped really grind out some games, especially in some instances against Ruby Sapphire too, if they didn't have the brawl for her or a way to remove her. It was just so effective.
I think it really shined too against other steel decks. Just the amount of willpower she has, and even against steel, just pulling back a Daisy or something. Now you just put 10 willpower into play, for the cost of 6. So just a really nice tool that makes this deck really shine.
The ability to have 3 of the big Cinderella Stout-Hearted. A lot of Steel Song lists, I mean, maybe they play 2 or 1, but it seems like it was really able to shine in this deck because of the Mufasa potential, and just it makes it more likely that you're going to shift on top of the 1-drop.
Yeah, and there were quite a few games that I was able to win just by even shifting, the Cinderella, and suddenly it was something the opponent really couldn't answer, or it was like a surprise extra 2 lore on top of the Ballroom Sensation Cindy. So really like a lot of the different lore threats in the deck, and being able to play 3 Gantus as well is nice. And then the Chen Po, there's some decks just cannot get through a 4/7 very efficiently.
Yeah, Chen Po definitely won games for me.
So even just playing the 3-cost dock and then ramping out a Chen Po on turn 4, that just feels amazing in a lot of decks, and protects everything you've played before, so you can kind of just keep questing out behind him, and that seems like another strong line with this deck.
Yeah, and it's looking like Gantu and Pluto are really the set 6 cards that made their way into the deck, so really cool to get to test them out as well. And Pluto especially is such a great stat line, and then Rapunzel, there's so many characters in this deck, like Lawrence too, that just have really good stats, especially on the willpower side of things, so that makes them pretty good into Steel already. And then when people need to challenge into some of your stuff, you're able to set up Rapunzel heals that they just hopefully can't avoid. So I really, really enjoyed the deck, and yeah, that was what we played. And so yeah, I mean, we know that there's, at least not for us, any tournaments coming up before set 7 drops, but we definitely know there are a few more weekends of events before set 7 releases. And if anyone has any tournament left and is looking for a spicy fun list, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah. So now we will get back at the next topic, which is going to be the set 7 reveals.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of reveals in the last week or so, which has been super fun, just to kind of get bombarded with all these new gameplay mechanics. And
yeah, we got the whole
cool
set
cards.
really revealed in about a week's time almost, so I mean, it was pretty rapid fire.
We're still just waiting on some Enchanteds at this point, but we got the first taste of those earlier today, and it's looking really cool so far. So, but yeah, we thought we'd just do some quick thoughts on some cards.
Yeah, we're going to try to lightning round it, because there's a lot of cards that were revealed, and we're not going to go over them all, but just some of the highlights. And then going forward, we'll see how long these videos typically will be, but definitely with this reintroduction and all this recent reveals that have happened, we thought it'd be good to just dive into it all while it's still fresh. So here we go, kicking it off with Aurora, a legendary in Amber. This is Waking Beauty. She's a 3-cost inkable, 1/4 stat line with 2 lore, and Singer 5. And then she has an ability, Sweet Dreams, that says whenever you remove 1 or more damage from a character, ready this character. She can't quest or challenge for the rest of this turn. So, I mean, Singer 5 already on a 3-drop is pretty good. I mean, people play Ariel for that effect, but unlike Ariel, she's not fetching songs off the top. But if you're able to, let's say, heal something with Rapunzel, maybe you quested with Aurora first, and then you want to, ready her with her effect and then sing a song, or maybe you are able to sing a song and then heal something and then ready her and sing another song, or maybe you just want to leave her up at the end of the turn to protect her. Like, there's a lot of flexibility with this card, and then she's a 2-lore threat, so I know she's a little weak to the Brawls and the Human Sisus of Lorcana, but outside of that, she does have some potential.
I think if you can just curve out like 1, 2, 3 with her, then maybe you could strength your own Aurora just by singing it, and then if you have Rapunzel, you draw into 3 additional options, which, maybe you find a Zeus, and you can ready Aurora when she's healed, so then that just opens up her ability to maybe remove something with the Zeus, or if you don't like your hand, there's potential to do the whole new world right off of Aurora. So, she does get banished by a lot of red removal, like you said, but I think
if they're taking their turn off to do that, I mean, maybe you'll just throw down a new threat the next turn.
Yeah, so. Or maybe, maybe they spend their whole turn removing her, and then maybe you Naveen Whole New World after that. Like, I think if you build this really aggressively, it maybe has a little bit of a higher ceiling of what you can achieve, even though at first glance it seems like it might not be that great. But I'm a huge fan of this, and I love the classic-looking artwork here. And it's the first Amber Aurora.
Yep, and she is a hero and a princess, so if this has any princess deck synergy, there's potential for that too. And I know people like to compare, like, would you rather play this or Gaston? He does have a 3/3 stat line and can also sing 5. So, I mean, depending on what you're trying to tech against and what's more important to you, there's reasons to run both.
Because she does quest a little faster and, has higher willpower. So,
and the artwork on this legendary card is phenomenal, so... We will move on now to Baloo, another legendary.
Yes, he is a Ruby legendary. He's an uninkable 6-cost. This is All Iron Paws. He's 5 strength, 4 willpower, and 2 lore. And his ability, Fight Like a Bear. Your characters with 7 strength or more can't be dealt damage. So this is... It just sounds like such an interesting ability. I don't believe there's a ton of characters in the game right now that have 7 strength or more that see competitive play, but there definitely are some, and there's ways to, modify stats with other cards. So there might be a really cool deck out there that can kind of increase the strength of your entire board and thereby kind of give your board some immunity from damage. Of course, this doesn't stop other types of removal that just straight up banish.
Yeah, it'd be kind of sad if you built up a huge board of, big satted characters and then they just eat a Be Prepared, but... sometimes you just got to go for it, and, maybe you could combine this with Cricky, and all of a sudden all your characters that get to that 7 damage threshold, like, won't take damage if you want to do trades with them. Maybe you pair it with that Maximus that gives you lore at the end of your turn if you have characters of a certain strength or more. Like, it'd be a fun build around, whether or not it sees competitive play. So, next up we have Basil, a 6-cost inkable, 3/6 with 3 lore. And an ability, draw them out. Whenever this character quests, opposing damaged characters gain Reckless during their next turn. So I think it's cool that this gives all opposing damaged characters Reckless. A lot of cards we've had in the past, like Lyle, let's say, or Jacques, they might give one character Reckless for the turn, but this is just the whole board if it's damaged. So, if you had, let's say, the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy and it pinged everything and then they're all Reckless... that would really slow things down. Grab your sword, whatever. Or, if you pair it with the new Ruby Emerald Queen card, there'd be some synergy there too, and we'll touch on her a little bit later. But that is Basil.
Next up, we have Baymax, Giant Robot. I know this card's gotten a lot of discussion in the community.
Very excited about this one.
Very well deserved because it seems like a great card. So 6-cost uninkable, but you can universal shift him for 4, which means you can shift him onto any character in the game. So that's very interesting. If you're against Emerald Sapphire, you're always going to have to think once they have 4 ink, like
could this character become a Baymax?
Might shift on anything they've got in play. The 5/5 stat line is very nice for trading. Also, because it costs 6, if you're shifting for 4, you can immediately sing up to 6 cost songs. So that's pretty cool there. And then 2 lore is, of course, nice. And when you play him, if you shifted to play him, you can remove all damage. So if you had a character down before that had made a trade and survived, or took some damage from a spell in action, shifting this up will heal that character. So that is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it feels pretty strong, the idea of playing, let's say, a Tipo on turn 2 and ramping to 3, and then on your next turn just inking and turning your Tipo into a 5/5 like that. That sounds pretty good. So yeah, something to look out for. And another powerful card. This one has gotten quite a reaction. This is Bell, Apprentice Inventor. 3 cost, inkable, 3/3 with 1 lore, and what a mess. During your turn, you may banish chosen item of yours to play this character for free. So right away, I mean, that free word, that's pretty good when you can do things for free. So I think especially in, let's say, Sapphire Steel, if you have 4 Popsicles in your deck and 4 Fortispheres, I mean, the odds of having one of those on turn 1 are pretty good. And then right away, they draw a card on play, and then as long as you have one of these bells in hand, you can banish your item and have a 3/3 on turn 1. So I think that's pretty amazing, because compared to the other characters in the game, at that 1 cost, like, she's going to be bullying a lot of them, and keeping them, scared to quest, let's say. And, she'd probably be able to get, a couple, at least a 2-for-1 value, if they are offering up their characters. So I think great against, like, aggressive decks at slowing them down. And I know that's something Sapphire Steel in particular has struggled with a little bit, because if you're taking a turn off to, let's say, play an item instead of a character, I just love how this allows you to do both in one turn. And on turn 1 already, that's pretty crazy. And she can sing 3-cost songs too. So
yeah, I think she kind of shores up a potential issue that some slower ramp decks have had, and that's not having much board presence early. So, maybe you don't always want to be playing her on 1 if you're, like, worried about your hand size and you want to keep your items in play and you're against a slower deck. Maybe you don't need a 3/3 down. But for the most part, I think if you are against a deck that really needs to fight for the board early, just getting a 3/3 down, that might completely shut your opponent out for a couple of turns while they have to build up a board to try to answer this one card that really didn't cost anything.
And as we'll see later, there's going to be a cheaper Tamatoa than the set one that we're used to, that can also get back some of these items you've maybe banished already and just keep the card draw engine going.
So it seems like that would really also help balance out Bell, because if you're destroying your item, you can always get it back later with that Tamatoa pretty efficiently.
So I'm very excited about this card, and any Sapphire enjoyer will be as well. But
next up we have Bolt, Super Dog. This is an Amber Steel, so dual ink here, 5 cost, but you can shift him for 3. 3/5 stat line. He is a hero. And then 2 lore, and his first ability is Mark of Power. Whenever you ready this character, gain 1 lore for each other undamaged character you have in play. So, if you've ever been against an Amber Steel board that's very wide, this could be quite terrifying to sit across from, because if you don't have a way to get rid of him, then when he readies, he's going to potentially get a bunch of free lore off any character that isn't damaged, and then, he can quest again. And if you play any cards that ready him up, and there's some of that in Amber.
Like Sven.
So, yeah, that's just even more potential to get more bursts of lore there. And then his second ability, Bolt Stare, you can exert him to banish a chosen illusion character. So right now I don't think there's a ton of illusion characters in the game. Maybe there's like 3 or something like that. So really that ability might not be active very much, and especially depending on if illusions see a lot of competitive play or not. But for the most part, it looks like he's offering a good variety of abilities here,
and it's nice that it's there in case you ever do need it. And I think he'd be fun in like a Rockstar Stitch deck if you're able to go really wide. And then you could get a lot of lore off of his Mark of Power ability. But yeah, that is Bolt, and he is one of the first card reveals that really cued people into the idea that maybe we were getting dual ink cards in this set, and they were right. So that was cool to see. And next up, Donald Duck. Now this is one of the last ones that was revealed for the set, and I was really excited to see this. I think the ability, Obfuscate. Opponents need 25 lore to win the game. That's just, that's pretty cool. I know there's certain decks out there where, maybe they're an aggressive deck, Amber Amethyst, or maybe Emerald Amethyst, or whatever, even any Amethyst deck really, where they get close and you think, oh, they're just like a go and a bounce away from the win or something, and all of a sudden, if they're kind of gassed out, but you're just worried about that happening, if you drop this in and they have no way to remove him, and they don't, I mean, even if they have the go bounce, all of a sudden maybe they were only 2 lore away and now they're 7 lore away from the win, and that's just much, much different. And then that'll give you the time to either completely shut them out or then start questing for the win yourself, and all of a sudden if they have to go on defense, then you've probably won. So, and his stat line, he is 7 cost uninkable, which is a little pricey, and although he doesn't really do anything immediately on play, he kind of has an on-play effect of like setting the opponent 5 lore further away from the win. So I think that is very relevant in some cases, and he's worth 3 lore himself. And with the 5/6 stat line, like a Zeus isn't going to be enough to take him out. So he is pretty sturdy, and I'm very excited that it at least exists in the game, and the art is amazing too, and a legendary Donald. Like it's very cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool card. I think it might potentially be hard to fit into some decks just with the uninkability, and then if you're in a position where you really need him not to get banished, you might not be questing with him either. You might just put him into play and hope he survives, so they don't finish him off somehow or bounce him back to your hand and then kind of close the game from there. So this helps delay, but then you also need to come up with answers to their board and try to outlast their resources too, because obviously if they're kind of gonna win a turn later, this won't be enough on its own. But
I will say it
helps maybe a late game control deck just buy a little extra time. So I like what this card's trying to do at least.
Yeah, and sometimes people, or a game might come down to a race in the end, or maybe the opponent thinks, oh well, I'm almost there, so I'm gonna quest and get close, and then you'll have to spend your time trading and you'll be farther from the win. But maybe if they don't know that you have this and you drop this in and then you quest out and threaten the win in the next turn, and all of a sudden they're too far away and have to start chanting you instead, it could save a game like that. But might not happen too often. But it's a little reminiscent of that Emerald Peter Pan too, that says that the opponent can't gain lore until they've challenged him that turn. Just a way to kind of delay or make them have to answer this before they can get the win. So I like it overall, and yeah, I am curious to see if it makes a splash in the next set or not.
Next up we have Fidget, and this is an Emerald Ruby card. It's a 4-cost inkable 2/3 stat line with 2 lore, and he has evasive. So it's kind of like the 4-cost Tinkerbell from set 1 in terms of cost and stats and lore. But then his ability is that whenever he quests, you can choose another one of your characters and they gain evasive until the start of your next turn. So essentially you can keep kind of protecting something by giving it evasive, and if your opponent doesn't have answers for that, that could really help you run away with the game if you're just questing faster than they can deal with. But the only potential issue is he really can't quest until the turn after you play him, and then he'll be protecting something that's already in play that can quest, because otherwise, sure, you could play a new thing down, but really the evasive is more helpful when they went on a quest themselves, and therefore can't be challenged. So it's interesting. I think it does have some serious potential, though, because evasive is very strong if your opponent doesn't have an answer for it.
Yeah, it could help run away with the game.
Yeah, so I like it a lot. And it also has other applications. Like if you played something with Rush, like a big Maui, I know giving Maui evasive might be a great way, just on play, to come swing out a Genie or something like that, or take out an opposing Elsa. And
he does have the set 1 Pongo stat line, which doesn't really see play right now, but with the added effect, that might help incentivize people to give it a try.
And since he needs to quest to do his ability, they're really incentivizing you to just be using it on something else and keep questing your Fidget here. So
I thought it was cool to see this character pop up again, because in the first really big tournament that I won, had Fidget in the deck, the earlier Fidget, but this one too, I love the art on. And you can see he's looks to be in that London vibe, and he's high flying up there on a rope.
Not sure who's trying to pull him down. It looks like maybe
he's determined to get away and evade them, which is also very fitting with his keyword. So That is Fidget. And next up, Giant Cobra. Now this one also has been very well received in the community. It's a 3-cost inkable 4/4 with 1 lore. And then obviously that is very good stats. I know in Steel usually people, if they want to get a 4/4 for 3, you play Lawrence, and that is 2 lore, but the moment Lawrence takes damage, he becomes a 0/4. So this one is always a 4/4. And also when you play this character, you may choose and discard a card to gain 2 lore. So that right there seems really good, especially someday if there's ever like advantages to discarding particular cards, like, oh, when this card is discarded, an effect happens, like it could be even better. But
maybe we'll see some of that in set 8, you never know.
Maybe.
I'm thinking we're going to see more Jafar and Illusion based cards, and it's possible they'll synergize.
Yeah, but at least right now, the ability itself, like let's just say you get to 16 lore, which isn't that hard to do when you're playing Amethyst Steel, and to play this card you have to be playing Amethyst Steel. Let's say you're at 16 and you have one of these and a snake in hand and a couple throwaway cards. You can, as long as you have 8 ink, you could play this and dump a card for 2 lore, bounce it back and replay and get the other 2 lore, and you just burn for 4 lore for only 8 ink. So there's a lot of card draw in Amethyst, and that is a very possible scenario that could happen. But it does have a downside to the card, and that is the Banish ability, which says when an opponent chooses this character for an action, banish them. So even if you just fire the cannons on this for 1 ink, this is getting banished. So that would be very efficient for the player playing Fire the Cannons. So yeah, I mean, there's times where this might, be a disappointment to you, where you run it out and it goes down for, without too much of a fuss. But when it does stick, it's a very impressive stat line for the cost, and I'm sure it will see a lot of play.
Next up, we have Hades, Fast Talker. This is for you Ruby Amethyst enjoyers. It is a 6-cost uninkable 4/6 Storyborn Villain Deity with 2 lore. And his ability, for just a little pain, when you play this character, you may deal 2 damage to another chosen character of yours to banish chosen character with cost 3 or less. So you do have to have another character in play in order to use this ability, and the banish is limited to something that costs 3 or less. So that's definitely some potential downsides of the card. But there are some strong 3-cost characters in this game that maybe aren't typically banished by a Medusa, like a Lawrence, for example,
yes.
Or the new Cobra that we just saw is a 4/4. But it only costs 3, so Hades can actually remove that.
Yeah, I've heard not too many people being too impressed with this, but I really do like it because of the stat line.
I think the stat line
reason
helps a lot too, because when you pay 6 for a Medusa, you're getting a 4/4 that quests for 1. It's not very aggressive. So sometimes when I'm watching like Ruby Amethyst matches, and they try to control things, they're usually coming from behind. And then they might actually need to close the game quicker against some of these more aggro decks that have already got a lot of lore. And, Hades would help you do that faster than the Medusa would. You just have to, when you're building your deck, think about, like, maybe you play one of this and maybe one Medusa and then a couple Tremaine, or, some mix of the 3.
Yeah.
If you really don't want to, give up on the Tremaine and Medusa, because I think they're all valid for different reasons.
I think if the meta's full of a lot of characters like Lawrence that are trying to get around the Medusas of the world, just by being 4 strength or higher, then this is a great way to still target them. I guess you do have to have a character in play to deal damage to, or you're unable to use that ability, so that really is the threat there. But there's a lot of times where you have Medusa in hand and maybe they play a goat or whatever it is with 4 strength and you're unable to hit it, and I guess this wouldn't hit the goat either since that costs 4. But there is potential to hit anything that costs 3 or less, so I do think that's very flexible in its own way. So very cool looking card too, the art, and I love how on these dueling cards, like the left side of this is very amethyst hued, and then the right side has that ruby coloration to it as well, which just looks really cool. And Hades, has always been one of our favorite Disney villains because we love the Hercules movie, and he's such a funny villain too. So he
kind of hoping he's like the big villain of the next arc of after we get past Jafar. Like I'm kind of hoping it might be Hades, but
for set 12.
You never know.
But okay, next up we have Hey, a Floodborn Sapphire Steel card, 5 cost inkable, 1 strength and 5 willpower with 2 lore, and shift 3. And I do love his subtitle, Expanded Consciousness. I think that is pretty clever, pretty hilarious. But yeah, he's got resist +1, which is great. So already with 5 willpower and then resist on top of that. Pretty beefy. He only hits for 1, which is not ideal. But he has an ability, Clear Your Mind. When you play this character, put all cards from your hand into your inkwell face down and exerted. So this would ramp you very fast, especially if you shifted it on 3 when you should, I guess, have more cards in hand than if you ink all the way to 5 and play them. So yeah, it'll be curious to see if dumping your hand and then just being left with whatever you had on board and hoping you can draw good things off the top will be good enough or not. But it is possible you set up a draw engine ahead of time. Maybe with, maybe you have Hiram in play and you've got an item ready to go so that, he can quest after you've dumped your hand and keep it filled. And yeah, I think...
I know there's a new Jasmine as well that helps you draw cards when you have allies in play. So that's another Sapphire Steel card. So I think just a fun,
different way to build Sapphire Steel than we've seen. And yeah, I will be curious to see if Hey, who is a fan favorite character, finds his way into some decks.
Next up, Hiro Hamada, Future Champion. This is a 3-cost Emerald card, 3/3 stat line with 1 lore. He's a Storyborn Hero Inventor, and his ability, Origin Story. When you play a Floodborn character on this card, draw a card. So, this would combo nicely with the Baymax that we saw earlier. Mm-hmm. You could just on curve play your Baymax and then draw a card, so it's just kind of replacing itself. I know there's a Sapphire Emerald Hiro Hamada dual ink card that we'll see later, and this is one of the potential things you could use to shift that. And I think just the ability to replace itself is nice in this ink combination, because Emerald Sapphire doesn't have a ton of card draw depending on what version you're doing. Obviously you can do Clarabelle in the late game if you want to try to drop to your opponent, but sometimes you're against an aggressive deck and then maybe they've played out most of their hand, so in those matchups she doesn't shine as much. And maybe you're playing an item package version of Emerald Sapphire and then you can draw that way. But if you want to play a more character based version, it will lack more draw, and I like how this hero kind of could just replace itself. And there's a lot of good shift targets in this potential Emerald Sapphire deck. So.
Yeah, and I think with the Baymax and the hero we're going to look at now, I think people are really going to respect this shift card and want to remove it as soon as they can, because here he is. It is Hiro Hamada, Armor Designer, and this got me extremely excited to play Emerald Sapphire. This is 7-cost inkable 4/6 with 3 lore and shift 5, and the ability You Can Be Way More. Your Floodborn characters that have a card under them gain evasive and ward. So I really like this, because not only would your opponent need to have evasive characters to be able to challenge this if it's shifted on top of another card, but also they would not be able to target this with removal cards either. So you'd really need outs like Be Prepared, or maybe if this was your only card in play and they play a Lady Tremaine, would make you banish this. But outside of things like that,
I mean the 6 willpower is going to make it super hard for Amber Steel or any Steel decks to really.
I think this would really just shut down anything Amber Steel is doing in terms of if they need to remove this, because that deck really doesn't play any evasives typically, and then you can't target this with ward or with any damage spells. So I think the potential is there. Obviously shifting this character means you're not going as wide, and then if you have other shifted things as well they're not going to benefit from the effect unless they are on top of the card, so that means they also didn't go very wide. So it'll just be interesting to see if that'll be enough things happening on your side of the board to have you be winning the race, where you can kind of just start questing for the win, or if you'll need to take a slower, more controlly route and then go for it later. But
it certainly looks like a fun way to try to build your deck.
Oh yeah, and I'm very excited to try this. Maybe one of my most excited decks to try so far from set 7, but lots of other cool things on the way too, so let's keep it going. Also in that ink color,
up next we have Emerald Sapphire Action Ink Geyser, which costs 3 and is uninkable. And each player exerts all the cards in their inkwell. Then each player with more than 3 cards in their inkwell returns cards at random from their inkwell to their hand until they have 3 cards in their inkwell. So essentially we are just destroying all the ink, putting it back into our hands, anything above 3. So whether your opponent's at 5 or whether they're at 7 or 9, We're just going to subtract all their ink, go back to 3, it goes back into their hand. So, on the one hand, someone who's ramping a bunch probably has expensive cards they want to play. So playing this would help negate their ability to do that, and they'll have to start ramping again to try to get back up to those costs.
It also deramps yourself, so...
It does, so it's a very interesting concept here. I think there's several ways you could try to play it. Almost the way that excites me the most is maybe just using this as maybe throwing a couple of these in a really aggressive Emerald Sapphire deck, so that if you are against those later game decks that maybe want to play a Be Prepared on turn 7 or get up to like a big Sisu on turn 8, if you don't need to play really expensive things, you can just pay 3 for this, and suddenly maybe they really needed to play it that turn to kind of stay in the game, but now they can't. I think that's really a potential amazing use of this card. Also, you could build your deck in a way like maybe you're using Fishbone Quills and things, and so after you play this, you're able to quickly like double ink in a turn, get back up to the higher amounts, and then just kind of outpace what they can do because you can play bigger things faster again. So
I think this is it's a cool card to exist. I think
there's times, of course, where you might draw this and like, I'm not in a position to use this.
Right.
It's not going to help me, or maybe they're playing a super aggressive deck and everything they have costs like maybe 4 or something, and then you just gave them a bunch of cards back to their hand as well that were in their inkwell. So
I think this is one of the first reveals I saw that was like a really spicy reveal, and I think it'll definitely have potential to shake some things up or just be one more thing to look out for, but I don't know how consistent it'll be,
and because it's kind of locked to you have to be playing Emerald Sapphire, so as soon as your opponent plays a card that isn't Emerald or isn't Sapphire, you're going to know this isn't even a possibility in their deck. So what percentage of the field is going to be on this ink pairing, that will kind of determine how popular this is in the meta or not. I think
I do like the idea of an aggressive deck where maybe things only cost like 3 or less in your deck, so even if you ink to 5, you can spam out a couple of cheap characters and then play this, and then at least everything you've got is playable, and maybe your opponent did not build their deck in such a way that they have much to play early on, and
maybe you
just might benefit. So.
Maybe you just need some more cards as well at a certain point, and all of a sudden maybe you were on 6 or 7 ink and you get 4 more options, and you can kind of leverage those to try to get you across the finish line.
Yeah, I think if you
knowing that your opponent is now down to 3 ink as well, and some of that higher cost removal is no longer playable.
Yeah, I think if you're ever winning the board at a certain point, and then you can play this, it'll really limit your opponent's comeback potential. So
it just seems fun and cool. I'm sure it'll be annoying as well to be on the negative side of it, but there'll be times when it isn't something you want to be playing at particular moments. So I think it's a really interesting card, and I kind of like that they're going for these kind of really out there, potentially impactful abilities here.
For sure. I think it'll keep it exciting. Next up, Jafar. It's a 3-cost inkable, 3/2 with 2 lore. So I like the 2 lore right off the bat. Seems like an aggressive card. And then he has an effect that says when you play this character, chosen character gains Challenger +2 this turn. So much like the Merlin Crab, it will help you get surprise trades that maybe doesn't look like your characters are strong enough to get based on your current board state. And now people will have to watch out for Jafar being played and buffing up one of your characters and getting a nice trade. And then when he has done that, he can stick around to either sing a song or more likely a quest for 2 lore. So I do think this is looking like a very good aggressive type card. I know Amethyst Steel, some Lord of the Ground versions have been doing very well lately, and I think this goes right in that deck. I mean, it doesn't have the on exit buff a character like the Merlin Crab does, but it at least has an extra lore, so it'll be interesting to see if people, at least in that deck, would opt for this or the Crab. But it gives other colors that didn't have access to the Merlin Crab the ability to run this instead. So I think it's more combat tricks. So next up, Kenai.
Kenai Magical Bear. He is a 3-cost Amethyst, 1/4 stat line here. Storyborn hero, 1 lore, and Challenger +2, so he can swing for effectively 3 strength when he's challenging. And then the ability, Wisdom of his story. During your turn when this character is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand and gain 1 lore. So this, gives you the ability to be gaining lore while you're challenging. which is, I like when cards are flexible like that because, it's kind of like Calhoun. You can get that lore while you're playing defense, essentially. And, that's what Kenai seems to be doing here. He does have to be banished, and it does have to happen on your turn. So there's definitely, your opponent can kind of see this coming and, maybe play accordingly.
I think the really
so
rough
I think it might
part
be
is
a
the
little,
one string.
yeah, I think it's probably a little slow as well. I mean, if you're playing this on 3, do you really want to like replay this on 4? I think there's probably just a couple issues here that might keep it out of the meta, and also the one strength, of course, is pretty unfortunate against some of the ruby removal.
I think because
it's a cool concept.
Opponents will probably hold their characters back if they see that this would get a trade, but then if so you might not get to make use of the challenger ability, and then the moment you send him on a quest, then they would probably just take him out and not get taken out back since he only does 1, and then on top of that, then if you're just leaving him up, then he's not really doing much. And the one lore besides, I don't know that this will see much play, but I do love the art on this Kenai from Brother Bear. And next up, we have Kita, who is a 4-cost inkable 3/3 with 1 lore, and she has Ward, and Ward has proven to be a very good keyword to have. And then she can also exert, and then look at the top 2 cards of the deck, and put 1 into the inkwell, and then the other one stays and goes back to the top of the deck. So it's similar to How Far I'll Go, only you don't get to actually draw the card off the top of the deck. So yeah, I think the fact that she has Ward would probably most likely allow her to at least get 1 ramp out of the deal, and then if she survives, you could probably ramp with her again or use her to sing or challenge or whatever. But yeah, the ward will help if they don't have a way to answer her on board. If you could maybe get multiple inks out of her. The 3/3 stat line for a 4 cost doesn't feel too amazing, and then only the 1 lore. But I think you're really playing her for the effect.
Yeah, so I kind of see her as like a Grammatala. Same cost, same stats. Ideally, you're ramping on 2 so that you can play this on 3. And then it feels better. And then also just the ward really protecting to make sure that you get to do that extra ramp. And then I like how, you're ramping off of your deck, not out of your hand.
Yeah.
So you're not needing to give up a card. And
I do like against things like Steel Song, like they just probably have no way to hit this since it has ward, which could at least slow them down too and allow you to build up more of a board.
Yeah, I think too, like in the Emerald Sapphire builds, they usually play either the Muses or Grammatala when they're on 4 ink.
Mm-hmm.
A deck that can remove the Grammatala really gets rid of some of the singing threats that deck, can put out while it does have their 4 costs down. So, playing Akita perhaps instead would give you that potential to stick a character that's not going to be removed until maybe it has exerted already. And I really like just kind of the comfortability, I think, that this will almost always get you at least a ramp and, kind of protect your hand size too. So not sure if people will switch to this or at least test this over something like the Grammatala, but I'd be interested to give it a try, and I've always liked Atlantis, and so I'm a fan of Kita.
And up next is Lady.
Miss Park Avenue. She is a 5-cost uninkable, 4/4 Floodborn hero. She can shift for 3 onto other ladies. She has 2 lore, and her ability, Something Wonderful. When you play this character, you may return up to 2 character cards with cost 2 or less each from your discard to your hand. So I think this has a lot of implications. You can either pull back a couple of things that quest very aggressively if you're just trying to cross the finish line, with daisies, piglets, things like that. If you want to play it a little more controlledly, you could take back something like a 2-drop Ursula. If you're worried about a song coming down in the future that might ruin what you've developed on board. And then even just a turn 3 4/4, that's pretty good stat-wise, especially questing for 2. So if you're against a bit of a slower deck, this is a stat line that's a bit harder to remove. And so I like that it has potential, kind of even late game, if you just hard cast this for 5, you're essentially adding 2 more cards to your hand because you're going to have some cheap characters in your discard. So just another engine to kind of keep your deck flowing, and I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I like the potential for aggro and also for, maybe a longer game control style grindy deck. So I'm curious to see how people decide to build around this lady. And up next, Lady Cluck. This is another Dual Link card, Sapphire Steel, 5 cost inkable 2/7 with Bodyguard and Ward. And now, normally, a 2 strength character is pretty weak to things like Brawl and the big 8 cost Sisu, but with the Ward, at least it's protecting you from the Brawl side of things and Medusa, so that's really nice. And then because it's a Bodyguard, it'll protect all your other characters unless, they have direct removal for your other non-warded characters. But if they do have to challenge their way through Lady Cluck to get at your characters, that 7 willpower is quite a lot. So I do like it, and, having played that Steel Fossa deck for set champs, Chen Po was very big, and so again I like a nice 7 willpower Bodyguard, and I am curious, with that Chen Po, if he'll see more play than Lady Cluck or vice versa. I think it really depends.
Yeah, I think if you want to play Lady Cluck, you probably also want to play the Maid Marian, because Maid Marian definitely makes Lady Cluck a lot stronger. And if you're not doing all that, it might save some deck space just to play Chen Po, because a 4/7 is also harder to remove against a lot of those removals that would normally hit a 2 strength anyway. So then you can kind of just try to get away with a 4/7 that doesn't have Ward. But definitely pros and cons to each. And I think
with the Maid Marian, I believe she gives Lady Cluck resist, and things like Cogsworth would also give her resist. And I think with her having the Ward, if they need to get through it, that is a lot of damage to sink through, and they can't rely on damage spells if it's something like Amber Steel. So she could lock certain decks just out of the game in the right setup. So I think the potential is there, and so that's Lady Cluck.
Next up, the Mad Hatter, Unruly Eccentric. He's a 6 cost inkable 3/5 Emerald Ruby dual ink card. And then 2 lore on him and his ability Unbirthday Present. Whenever a damaged character challenges another character, you may draw a card. So this is both your own characters that are damaged, challenging other characters, and your opponent doing the same. So you could potentially draw a lot of cards off of this if you've set up a board that requires them to answer it, through challenges. And they probably will not want to be giving you all those cards, because, card advantage is very important in this game. I do think the 6 cost is potentially a bit slow, but as maybe you top off your deck somewhere around here, and then just kind of hope that this is gonna put a lot more cards in your hand, and then you can keep going from there. I also like, card draw lends itself nicely to more of a controlling strategy as well, and I think some of the damage abilities that have been introduced in this set, especially for the Emerald Ruby pairing, some of those will work very nicely with this, just kind of helping put damage counters on your opponent's board as well as your own, so that no matter what's being challenged, hopefully you're drawing a card until this is taken care of. So I like the potential of this. Again, I think it's maybe a bit slow, but it's something fun to try.
Yep. And then we have Merlin, Clever Clairvoyant, a 1 cost inkable 0/1 in Amethyst Sapphire with 1 lore. And Prestidigitonium. Whenever this character quests, name a card, then reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a named card, put it into your inkwell face down and exerted, otherwise put it on the top of your deck. So this looks like a way to potentially ramp in Amethyst Sapphire. And I guess, you could build around this if you wanted to play like Ursula's Cauldron from set 1, which lets you basically look at and arrange the top of your deck. So then you could guarantee the ramp.
I also think you could play the 2 cost Merlin Squirrel, which would be on curve, and when you play that, you get to look at the top card of your deck, and you can just leave it on top, and then quest with this Merlin and name that card, and then that every time you bounce the squirrel too, you can look at the top again. So that would be interesting, like if, let's say you play this on turn 1 and then they play a Merfolk or a Diablo or something that has no strength, then you could potentially have a couple turns to try to ramp off of Merlin before they can remove him. And
the question is, is
that even
playing
worth it?
Those types of cards like the Ursula's Cauldron and the Squirrel, the Squirrel is not the best statted for a 2-drop, and this has no strength either. So, is the ramp going to be enough to, and maybe it will, because we know Blurple, once they get to those high inks, they could start playing things like Hades and Elsa and really locking out the opponent. Well, you get a lot of lore then toward the end all at once, but
of course it might take up a lot of deck space to be running 4 of these, plus some cards to help you look at the top, and then, it's pretty simple right now to just use a Tipo or a Sail
so
to
I won't be
ramp
surprised
on 2.
if people opt for, good old trustees that we've already, been playing with, but a different way to build it. And if you're thinking about running that Shift Merlin as well, that lets you grab any card out of your deck, I mean, then it would be advantageous to run maybe this Merlin and the Squirrel and just give you more shift targets for your Merlin that don't feel so bad to shift on top
And I think what
you don't always want to shift on a goat or a rabbit. With him, you kind of want their abilities to go on.
I think what this potentially offers as well is, Tipo and Sail both kind of ramp from your hand, and this is off the top of your deck, so essentially you can protect some of your hand size if you try to ramp this way instead. So all things to consider.
Yep, and next up is Mulan.
Mulan, Imperial General. We have amazing image quality here for this one, but she is a 7-cost inkable 5/6 with 2 lore. She's Floodborn, so you can shift her for a cost of 5. Hero and Princess tags, so that's pretty relevant a lot of the time. Evasive, so this is a pretty nice stat line to be evasive. 5/6 should trade out with Elsa's, Genie's, everything like that. And then the Exceptional Leader ability. Whenever this character challenges another character, your other characters gain. This character can challenge ready characters this turn. So while that was kind of a mouthful, basically if she challenges another character, everything else on your board can challenge ready characters for the rest of that turn.
That's a pretty powerful effect.
So yeah, I think if your opponent sees this in play, like, it's really gonna stop them in their tracks from questing with things they might otherwise have wanted to, because if it opens up their whole board to be removed by your board, essentially, like, that is not a good thing. So unless they're very close to winning, they're really going to have to think carefully about whether it's worth it to quest or not.
And I do think,
of course, you can shift her as a
right,
surprise, so people will have to be mindful, like, if there's a Mulan in play, then if they're going to 5 ink, be careful, like, do you really want to make some of those quests or those challenges and expose your characters? So just really cool to see this type of effect, making it a little more possible for challenge decks to do what they want to do best, which is to challenge. And it can be annoying when opponents are just holding their characters back and never letting you kind of trigger these abilities. So I like that this comes in on a shift character here.
And I think what's really nice too is this allows you to challenge warded characters if they're ready, which normally you can't target them with actions, so you can't like force exert them. But with this, if you can get a challenge off, then that you can challenge ready characters with your other ones. So yeah, I think it's very what Ruby Steel could really use to help it. I know there's been effects like this before, at least that let you challenge ready characters, but they're usually always uninkable, which is hard to always include in a deck. So now with this Mulan Shift and the previous Mulan Shift card that has the triple shot ability, opponents will really have to respect those Mulans that you have in play.
And even being evasive with such a nice stat line and 2 lore, if you're ever in a position to just quest this aggressively, like, that's gonna get you closer to 20 a lot faster than some cards do. And so I think it's all around, it's got a lot of things going for it.
Yes, and now Mushu has made his way into the game. The Majestic Dragon, 5-cost inkable 4/4 stat line with 1 lore. And he has 2 abilities, Intimidating and Awe-Inspiring. So the first, that says whenever one of your characters challenges, they gain resist +2 during that challenge. So, I mean, resist +2 is very powerful. Obviously, Cinderella Stouthearted has been a very strong card for a long time, and it's that resist +2 she has that makes her really hard to take down, especially against steel decks and just ping damage. So that's amazing that this can give this to any of your characters. And the cool thing is that that's just while this is in play. So they might not see this, obviously in your hand, but the moment that they offered you up a challenge that they thought they might get at least a 1-for-1 trade on, and then you drop this in and it's like, oh, surprise, my character has resist +2, so now maybe mine takes yours out and lives. That can just set up some amazing trades like that. And then Guardian of Lost Souls is the other ability that says during your turn, whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. So that's also helping you advance your way toward the win condition while challenging and paring down the opponent's board. So I think it's just very synergistic with what Ruby Steel wants to be doing, and really a card that might help vault that deck into a more viable, state in the meta. So very excited to see this card.
Now we have Pascal, Garden Chameleon, a 4-cost uninkable 3/3 stat line, Storyborn ally with evasive and 3 lore. So this is a lot of lore on a pretty decent stat line to be evasive. And I think it might be time to get those lanterns back out, so that we can play this on turn 3 and just start questing. I haven't played a lot of Amber, Amethyst, like aggro style decks, but I do think this offers it like a different way to play by having, usually those decks don't have much for evasives, except now maybe they top off with a Genie or something. But this is same cost as a Genie, but, more aggressive in terms of lore, and I think the stat line is harder to remove generally in terms of like the red removal. So I kind of like what this is potentially offering, and I think most decks like that probably cap off around 4 ink anyway. So being at 4, being uninkable doesn't seem like that much of a drawback to me, I guess, with this one. So I'm kind of hoping this one might see some play.
Yes, and now we have Perdita, Amber Sapphire. Now this color combination has been struggling lately, but this might help it out a little bit. 4 cost inkable, 1/4, and then 2 lore. With 2 abilities, Who's Next? Whenever this character quests, you pay 2 less for the next puppy character you play this turn. And Don't Be Afraid, your puppy characters gain Ward. And I do think Ward is a really strong keyword, as I've said before. And so, there's potential with this to at least blanket your board of puppies with Ward. And then as long as you can protect this Perdita somehow, because they could always just target her first with their removals. But the ability to, play a puppy for 2 less as well might help you kind of spam more to the board in an aggressive style deck as well. So, there's some puppy synergy there, and I think there's a couple more cards that fit this archetype that we'll see a little bit later that will really maybe give it the potential it needs to be somewhat competitive. So, but there you go, that is Perdita.
Now we have Pete, Pirate Scoundrel, a 1 cost emerald character with 1/2 stat line, Storyborn Villain Pirate, tags, and he has 1 lore, and his ability Pilfer and Plunder. Whenever you play an action that is not a song, you may banish chosen item. So I think this is an interesting card. There's probably, you can't really do this ability on turn 1 because you also need to be playing an action that isn't a song, which, is going to require you to spend some additional ink. So I don't know, like the ideal turn to play this is, plus your opponent has to have played an item already, and the later into the game you go, I don't know that you really want to be playing a 1-for-1/2 very much. And there is that Clarabelle, of course, already, the 1-drop that you can effectively pay 3 to just break an item. And I think that's very reasonable to not have to also be playing an action just to trigger the ability. So even though I think this is nice that it exists, and maybe a pirate deck might want, not to play a Clarabelle and so could use Pete instead, I just wonder if maybe this ability requires a little too much, too many things to line up, and then kind of requires you to also spend a card playing an action just to break 1 item. So I don't know. I think it might not be quite there, but overall I think it's a decent ability and kind of cool.
I like that it at least gives you a 1-drop.
It would fit in the pirate deck.
That can, threaten some early aggression, and then with the, all the popsicles that might be running around, and some of the a certain item in particular, Sapphire Coil, that we'll see soon, that might be very popular. Like, it would feel pretty good getting rid of that with him. So we'll see.
And he certainly is a good shift target for the dual ink Emerald Steel Pete, which we're gonna.
So he's got potential, and I like that flavor text. I wasn't stealing it. I was just keeping it safe. Yeah, very kind and
we know Pete's up to no good there for
yes.
Sure.
But here we go. Here's Pete Space Pirate. And I think this art is it's pretty cool. I don't know what he's emerging
he's
out
bursting
of
onto the scene. He's ready to cause some havoc.
But it's got this alien-esque glow about it behind him, and very cool. Space Pirate. So shift 4, and he's a 5/5 and 2 lore, and then he has Frightful Scheme. While this character is exerted, opposing characters can't exert to sing songs, and your pirate characters, including himself, gain resist +1. So I think right there, 6 against, let's say, steel decks that play Zeus, needing to deal 6 damage is kind of a lot. So if he has that resist active, he's essentially got, a 6 willpower kind of, if they're trying to hit him in one shot. And then the fact that your opposing characters can't exert to sing songs, that's really good against things like Amber Steel, and any deck really that wants to save some ink, and be efficient and utilize the song singing mechanic of Lorcana that is so powerful. So I really think this, just shutting that down, is great. And at least, if someone runs a Maui into him, he trades back. And the 2 lore means he's kind of aggressive as well. And that you can shift him on 4 and potentially sing up to a 6 song with him. And he's got all the pirate synergy and a villain as well. I think there's a lot going on for Pete. So he will probably see play, certainly in Emerald Steel.
Now we have a Queen of Hearts Emerald Ruby character here that costs 5 and is uninkable, but can shift for 3, being Floodborn. It's a villain queen and is a 2/6 stat line with 2 lore, and the ability If I Lose My Temper. Whenever another character is played, put a damage counter on them. So this affects your own characters being played as well as your opponent. And I think, this card is probably one of the engines that sets up a lot of the other Ruby Emerald cards from this set that care about having damage in play, like that Mad Hatter we talked about earlier. If every character is coming in with damage on them, then suddenly whenever you're trying to make trades, you'll be drawing cards off that Mad Hatter. So I really like kind of what this queen is doing, and the stat line is pretty good if you're shifting. So I really do. I think this is like a fun excuse to try to make Emerald Ruby work more effectively than it perhaps has in the past. And the art, just absolutely is amazing.
Phenomenal. Here. And this really solved the puzzle of, what all these cards are about that care about having damaged characters in Emerald. So we finally have the way to try to make it happen. So I love to see it. And we have Raja. So this is another one of those illusion characters. He's a 2-cost 3/3 for 1 lore. He is inkable. And he's got Vanish. So again, if he's targeted by an action of the opponents, then you banish him. I think this one, though, right here, Smee has long been one of the best 2-drops in the game since set 3 because, he's got that 3/3 stat line, cost 2. He does have 2 lore with the slight drawback that he takes damage when exerted, but this is just another 2-cost character that has a 3/3 stat line, which is really good. And unlike anything that costs more than this, like at least if he does eat an action, he gets banished, but you only invested 2 ink into him, so it's not such a huge deal. And also, a lot of 2-drops that have worse stat lines would probably get banished by, seal removal songs or whatever at this cost level. So I think against decks that don't have a way to easily answer him, he might get at least a 1-for-1, maybe a 2-for-1, and slow down aggressive decks. Just a different option, especially for decks like Ruby Amethyst that usually only run a Snake, which you have to have had a 1-drop to play, or you can't play it. Or maybe a Flynn Rider. Like maybe a Flynn Rider just isn't quite cutting it, and you would rather run out something like this in some matchups. So not sure where it'll see play, if it does see play, but I do think the stat line is good for, despite the banish keyword there.
Now we have Radigan, Nefarious Criminal. This is a legendary 4-cost inkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower, storyborn villain.
Love the frame break on this.
Yes, and he has 1 lore, but he can actually generate additional lore with his Marvelous Performance ability. Whenever you play an action while Radigan is exerted, gain 1 lore. So if you're playing a lot of actions, you can quest with him first or sing with him, and then every time you play an action, you're getting 1 lore while he's exerted. So I think that is very interesting. Definitely seems like it probably fits into some kind of a burn deck, that might be playing other actions that generate lore. So, it's an interesting card. I think it might lack a little something in terms of stats for the cost, and if you're not ramping this out, it might be a bit slow. But overall, I like what the effect is trying to do, and I'm sure some people will come up with some interesting ways to get the most out of him.
And now, Restoring Atlantis. We have a 5-cost uninkable action that says your characters can't be challenged until the start of your next turn. So, curious if this will see play. The effect could be very strong if you've got a big, wide board. But much like Kita, who, when you play her, you give your characters and theirs -3 strength until their turn, which effectively, prevents a lot of challenges that otherwise might happen. Your characters are still susceptible to any removal actions and whatnot that could be played. So, but in the right matchup where maybe a lot of the removal is just character based, this would be very good at letting your board just kind of quest out, and then you'd get to quest out again with them. the following turn.
And Kita didn't
before
really
they can
protect
challenge.
against rush, but this card does, because
does indeed.
just all of your characters in general can't be challenged until the start of your next turn. So I think that gives you like an extra layer of protection, and regardless of the stat lines, you can just kind of quest in your opponent's face when you play this card. So I think this might actually be,
and this could be good against,
interesting as like the top end of an aggro deck that
especially
just wants
against
to
cards like Maui Shark
wants
that
to
has
finish the game.
been so popular and has an effect that really makes you not want them to challenge any of your stuff. This would prevent that as well. So I think the uninkability and the costs, and it kind of relying on you having a setup where this is worth taking 5 of your ink, maybe your whole turn off to do. Like if it does protect your board, it could be worth it, but the chance that it might not be worth it, I don't know. Maybe this keeps it out of decks, but
I kind of like it
think
too in
it'll
a deck
maybe
that
see play
maybe like
in a niche deck.
Amethyst Steel, for example. If you have a dock and this, like maybe you don't like the board state to use this anyway, and you'd rather just play the dock, and you might not feel that bad about getting rid of it, or you could discard it off a Cobra if you're like, it's too early in the game for this, but I'll get 2 lore out of it, and look for my docks and my card draw and just keep the game going. And then maybe you do finally get pretty wide, and then you just play this and quest out a couple of times, and your opponent can't really respond. So I think maybe tacking a couple of copies in, or just one, like giving it a try, it might, in some games, it might be just the final little push you need.
And now, Restoring the Crown.
So this is a 6-cost uninkable Amethyst Steel action. Exert all opposing characters. Whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge this turn, gain 2 lore. So, if you don't like stalemates where everyone's just kind of building a board and staring at each other, this card kind of lets you become the aggressor all of a sudden and tap all of your opponent's things, and then you get to make whatever favorable trades you can find that turn, kind of clear up the board a bit and gain 2 lore in the process for each thing that you banished in a challenge. So I like the fact that this kind of helps try to break a stalemate situation. I do think, of course, anything that's uninkable and kind of high cost, especially when it's not a song, you're going to have to pay a lot of ink for this, so that will probably turn a lot of people off, or consider just maybe running one if you're going to run any. But it's just, I'm really curious to see if anyone can kind of get the most out of this card, and I like the effect, I like what it's doing, so I think being uninkable was probably definitely appropriate for this type of ability, because it could be very, very strong.
Helps you get her on board too. I do like that a lot. Scrooge is next. Another legendary card. Resourceful Miser. He's a 4-cost 4/4 for 1 lore and inkable, and he says you may exert 4 items of yours to play this character for free. So again, just the potential to play him for free is sounds pretty good to me. It might be a little bit hard to have 4 items to exert, but if you're in a very heavy item focused build, it might not be too difficult. And then he has Fortune Hunter, or when you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal an item card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So kind of like the set 1 aerial card, only on play you get to look at the top 4 for an item instead. So again, it's kind of pseudo card draw as long as you hit an item. And Sapphire items like Popsicle might just draw you into another card and keep the engine running. So that's nice. You might find a lucky dime or whatever you're after. But yeah, just a card that seems like it has the potential to give you some value. So, legendary one there. And up next,
Lady Tremaine, a 6-cost uninkable 3/3 stat line there with 2 lore. She is a Storyborn villain and has the ability That's Quite Enough. Exert to return chosen damaged character to their player's hand, then each opponent discards a card at random. So you can return your own character if you would like, or your opponent's, and then your opponent will discard a card at random. And if you're playing a multiplayer game, each opponent is doing the discarding. So, on the plus side, if you've kind of controlled the board to a point where, let's say you have that Queen of Hearts down and everything's coming in with a damage, you'll be able to exert Lady Tremaine to return whatever they just played to their hand, and then because they have to discard, they will lose that card. And so there's a potential where this could completely lock your opponent out of the game, assuming like any character they draw is not a removal that is able to get rid of her. But her stat line is pretty weak for this cost, so that's definitely a drawback. The uninkability is of course a bit rough. And if you don't have an engine in place that's damaging your opponent's characters, then she might be sitting on the board rather awkwardly, and not able to really do much. So questionable card in terms of playability, but I think it's a cool concept, and there might be a perfect list that would enjoy a couple of her in there. So.
And next up we have Lyle Tiberius Rourke. He is 8 cost inkable, 6/4 with 3 lore. And then he has Explosive. Once during your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, deal 2 damage to each character in play, including your own. And I think, something important to note here is it's just once during your turn. So at most, he's dealing, 2 damage to everything. So potentially a good way to do damage to weenie characters in aggro decks, especially if you're in colors that, don't have the ability to play Grab Your Sword. This is kind of Grab Your Sword in a different way, only it also hits your own. And but in Ruby, and it is inkable, so you don't have that cost of running a 5 cost uninkable in there. But yeah, it does seem a little expensive, I think, for the stat line of 4 willpower is a little bit vulnerable to pay 8 for, but it does have 3 lore, so if he sticks, he might quest a bit before he self-implodes the board over a couple turns. So an interesting card at least, and I think it's a very cool representation of that part in the movie, the way the art looks. So I like that. Don't know that it'll see much competitive play, but if it does, I'll be curious to see in what form.
Now we have legendary Mickey Mouse, Inspirational Warrior. He is a 2 cost uninkable steel card, 1 strength, 1 willpower, Dreamborn Hero, 1 lore, and Stirring Spirit. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may play a character for free. So, the 1 strength on its own, that might not be able to banish a lot of things. Your opponent should also be able to see this coming unless you're playing some kind of way to cheat him out with Rush. So there's always that you could do, especially I'm thinking Amethyst has some ways to do that. Ruby has some ways to do that.
Vitalosphere would give him extra strength.
And then, sometimes that 1 strength is not going to be enough to secure a banish, so you might need to play some strength modifiers, like potentially that new Jafar that we saw that gives +2, or a crab, Merlin Crab, that gives +3. So I think, if you have this down, your opponent will be hesitant to turn anything because, they don't want an 8, 9, or 10 drop, coming down on turn 3, essentially, or whenever that might happen. But, the later on in the game, this becomes less impactful as you get closer to being able to play cards that you otherwise, wouldn't in the early game. And also, the stats are pretty bad and it's not inkable. So if you're not able to force some challenging, or your opponent doesn't play into it, I think this might feel bad in your hand some of the time. And then, there's the conundrum of how many big things do you put into your deck that you maybe otherwise are never going to get to naturally. You might be inking if you're playing that big Goofy, for example. You're probably never getting to that amount of ink, so are you just going to ink him and hope the only way you're going to get him out is off of a Mickey? And I think good players will probably be able to play around this pretty well, but it is a scary ability, so I think this will cause a little bit of tension.
It's a really fun looking card, if nothing else. So I'm sure people will try to pull off some cool things with that. And next up, what would Mickey be without Minnie? So this is Minnie Mouse Storyteller, also legendary, also 2 cost uninkable. A 1/2 this time, no lore on the base card, but gather around whenever you play a character. This character gets +1 lore this turn. So theoretically, if you played 5 characters in the turn, she's questing for 5. And then just 1 more. Whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character loses strength equal to this character's lore until the start of your next turn. So maybe more realistically, you play like a 1-drop and a 2-drop on turn 3, and then she gets to quest for 2. And maybe they have a Calhoun in play, and you give Calhoun like -2 strength until the start of your next turn. So now Calhoun can't even take out Minnie Mouse. So, that's just kind of a way in an aggressive deck to not only have, an upside of you're never really sure how much lore she's going to be getting, but then also to kind of protect her and the rest of your characters by reducing, maybe they only have one decent static character in play, and if you can take its strength down enough so it can't really banish anything, then you're buying every one of your characters, like an extra turn of questing.
And I
so,
think an Amber
pretty
Steel
cool.
Pride Lands deck could be really scary with this, because if you're able to just have Stitch down and be, maybe you've got a little Simba in the Pride Lands, and all of a sudden you can spam out a bunch of cheap characters without really needing to spend any ink. And if all of a sudden she can quest for 7 or 8 or 9, like, I mean, some crazy numbers potentially, based on if you're rolling hot off of that Stitch draw. I think this could be an explosive way to just have some fun.
So yeah, another card with potential. And then we have Mr. Smee.
Mr. Smee is a 3-cost uninkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower, efficient captain. Dreamborn villain, pirate captain tags there. 1 lore, and then the ability Pipe Up the Crew. Whenever you play an action that isn't a song, you may ready chosen pirate character. So it seems like they're trying to push this theme of playing actions that aren't songs, probably because, songs are so efficient. That would probably be too strong if we were just able to get value off of singing. But this looks like it slots right into a nice pirate themed deck, and I really like how whatever you ready that's a pirate does not have any restrictions. So it can quest, it can challenge, it can sing, it can stay ready after you've done this. A lot of flexibility there. And also being 3-cost comes down the turn after a Smee generally, and being a captain can protect Smee from taking damage if your Smee wants to quest. So the steel one. So yeah, I really like what this card is doing if you want to build your deck around this theme.
Yeah, I think being able to ready something without restrictions. I know in one of the set champs I played this time around, I was against Emerald Sapphire deck that was playing the Warded Aerial that quests for 5 when you have more items, and then you came back. So in one turn, my opponent was able to quest for 15 by readying Aerial twice. With that, you came back. So I thought that was pretty cool, and just a sick combo. And maybe there's potential for something like that with this Smee. And next up is Pongo, so another Amber Sapphire, fitting that puppy theme. 6-cost uninkable 5/5 with 2 lore, and then found you little rascal. At the start of your turn, look at the cards in your inkwell. You may play a puppy character from there for free. So here we go. We have some inkwell manipulation. Normally you're not able to look into your inkwell anymore. I believe like the only card I know of from the past was the 8-cost uninkable Mufasa that would let you get cards back from your inkwell, and those were random without looking at them. So this one lets you look, and then you can play a puppy for free. So I mean, I think that's really cool, because at this point in the game you should have at least 6 ink, and if you're playing a puppy deck, there's probably some puppies that found their way into the inkwell. So yeah, to be able to just get one back for free, especially if you're not needing as much ink anymore, would be good. And I have also heard people talk about the Lilo card that you can decide to play or not out of your discard from at the start of your turn. So you could theoretically play her by paying 2 to put her in play, and then ordering your triggers in the bag. You could then use Pongo to play a puppy, and if you had chosen to exert a puppy as one of the inks, if you could somehow remember where you left one, then you could play that puppy so that you're not down an extra ink, a 3rd ink at the start of your turn. So that'd be a cool, efficient way to do that if she found her way in the deck. But who knows, with all the puppies you want to fit in there, maybe there's no room for Lilo. But just a cool thing regardless, and he's a pretty good stat line, so I like to see it.
Now we have the Sapphire Coil, which is a 2-cost inkable item in Sapphire, of course, and it has a brilliant shine. During your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may give chosen character -2 strength this turn. And it's not just once per turn, so this can happen multiple times. And this has some implications, of course, with a lot of, especially with Ruby-based removal. We know Brawl, for example, the human Sisu, and the big dragon Sisu all care about how much strength your opponent's characters have. So even if you just played this on turn 2, and maybe, like, I've heard some people say they don't know if you should be playing this on 2, or if that interrupts your ability to ramp on turn 2, what you might want to be doing. But I do think if you're against a deck that wants to play really aggressively to the board, sometimes it's more important to answer the board quickly. Otherwise, you find that they're at a lot of lore and you need to answer everything like almost every turn in the late game, and sometimes you just can't do that. So this, you could play it on 2, and then on 3 you could play, you're going to keep inking multiple times, over the next several turns, because that's just naturally what you want to do. So you could, ink and then play the human Sisu, and then all of a sudden, anything 3 strength or less is going to be banished by that. Or you could just brawl, and because of how brawl works, anything 4 strength or less would be banished by this coil. And in the late game too, there's not a lot of high strength characters in some particular decks, so just the -2 strength reduction, like that can put a lot of things into range of, like, brawls, Sisus, etc. So I think this is definitely a big threat, and if it proves to be as strong as some people are worried about, then I think people should probably consider playing some item destruction cards. Benja is a good card in Steel. That it doesn't take much work to just play that on turn 3. So I mean, if they spent their whole turn playing a Sapphire Coil on 2, and then you bench it immediately, I mean, that's got to be a great tempo play. So I am curious to see how much of a splash this coil makes, and
it could also help
how
Emerald
people adjust if it does.
With cards like Under the Sea and the Muses and Cloud Kicker,
I think
being able to reduce their strength and play those cards, it also has some synergy there. So
gives that combo a lot more power, I do believe.
Yeah, it's definitely one to look out for. And decks that throw in cards like Lawrence to be 4/4s to get around brawls and Medusas like that, it just might not be good enough against things like the Sapphire Coil, whereas, an Ice Block only takes you down 1 strength, and that might have been enough for Lawrence to evade a brawl. But again, it doesn't replace itself when you play this, so it doesn't develop a character to the board, and so, maybe some games it works out just fine to be against this, and sometimes I'm sure this will be, quite oppressive, but it's always fun to try to overcome challenges in a game, so look forward to facing plenty of this, I'm sure.
Well, we are running a bit long here, so we're going to try to pick up the pace just a little bit as we kind of blaze through these last reviews.
So we have Shere Khan, 4 cost Uninkable Emerald, 4s all around on this card, strength and willpower, and then 4 lore, and then an ability: when you play this character, discard your hand. So I think normally that sounds like that wouldn't be too good, the discarding part, but it is very aggressive, so maybe your deck is very aggressive and you're hoping this is about the top of your curve and you're fine to play off the top of the deck. Maybe you try to pair this with something like the Tiana from set 2, that when she's exerted and you have no cards in hand, your opponent can't play actions, so all of a sudden if they were relying on things like Brawl or Be Prepared to come back, all of a sudden they can't use that. And, who knows? I think there's a lot of potential to try to build around this thing, but I just love that. I mean, 4 lore, 4/4 on turn 4. Pretty cool. The uninkability, got to limit your uninks there, but this does seem like something to build around at least.
Snow White, Fairest in the Land, is a 4-cost Amber, 2/2 stat line, 2 lore, Storyborn Hero Princess, and she is hidden away, which means this character can't be challenged. So, if she's protected against challenges all the time, which is nice. Of course, her stats are pretty vulnerable to, like, steel-based removal or strength-based removal. So, she's definitely not insulated from all the threats out there, but the ability where she can't be challenged, that just kind of lets you freely quest her every turn, if that's what you'd like to do, because the only threats to her are things that are, probably going to be played out of the hand, removal and things like that. So I love what this card is doing, and I think it's probably fairly costed, to make up for the potential strength of that ability.
And then we have Tamatoa, so another amazing looking Sapphire Legendary card here, 6 costed Inkable, 4/5 for 2 lore. So, maybe the stats for a cost of 6 aren't the best, but 4 is still good strength, and the 2 lore is fine. But when you play this character, you get to return up to 2 item cards from your discard to your hand. So if you were, discarding or banishing an item to try to get that bell out, or if you've already, been using High Arm to break a couple items, you can just grab them right back, right on play. So that's pretty nifty. And then, if your opponent, let's say, benjed your Sapphire Coil and you want it back, well, here's a way to do it. And then he has I'm Beautiful Baby. Whenever this character quests, you may play an item for free. So this feels like, a really Whereas the other one's maybe a more consistent, practical ability. This one, if it lines up and you have like a lucky dime in hand, and you get your 2 lore, and then you just save yourself 7 ink and develop the lucky dime, like that is a really big tempo swing, at least in a race type of scenario. Because a lot of games it can be hard to find time to pay 7 to basically put an item into play that you maybe can't use the same turn, and that isn't doing anything to the opponent's board. So I really like the upside potential with this, and I'm sure it'll be something to watch out for. People really will not want to allow this character to quest.
Now here's Teika, which is a very cool design, being a 10 cost inkable with 12 strength and 12 willpower. So she's really packing a punch, and she can take quite the punch as well. She is the elemental terror version of Teika. She can shift for 7, so you might not have to pay that full 10. She has 3 lore on her, very respectable, and she is in an ancient rage. During your turn, whenever an opposing character is exerted, banish them. So this opens up some fun possibilities of playing cards like the 7-cost uninkable Ana that exerts your opponent's entire board. So that's kind of like a one-sided board wipe if you have this Teika down. Also just playing like the big shift Elsa, to banish a couple of things, or the rush Elsa to banish one. There's several cards in this game that cause exert effects, and the challenge will be getting this into play, keeping it in play, and then playing out the cards that have those effects. And because of how expensive this is, it's going to happen much later in the game. It might be too late, against a lot of aggressive strategies. So it looks very fun. I hope that it does some work, but I do think it might be too expensive here.
And then we have the Queen, which is a 4-cost, 4 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lore character, inkable. And when you exert the Queen using this ability, you can choose an opponent and then have them remove 3 cards from their discard and put them on the bottom of the deck, I believe. And then and you get 3 lore for each card that was moved that way. And then also, if you chose a princess character, then you can gain 4 lore instead. So I think just the fact that this is an exert ability too, and it's a 4/3, so typically that's pretty good against Ruby removal, as long as you aren't strength reduced. And then the ability to potentially do this on an exert. So if you could ready her with, let's say, LeFou or whatever, maybe you could gain 6 to 8 lore off of 2 uses of this in the same turn. So there's this big potential there, and I think that is just something to keep in mind. I think it'd be a much different looking deck that would try to build in that way. And yeah, it does kind of rely on your opponent to have enough cards in their discard to really be capitalizing on this. And then the princess factor might or might not come into play depending on their deck. But it's still a lot of lore to be getting out of a 4-cost card that is inkable and that will probably trade back with most things that challenge into her. So I think overall, a cool card to maybe build a deck around, and legendary, and love the art on a very classic character.
Now we have the Return of Hercules, 5-cost inkable Emerald Action, also a legendary card, with the ability each player may reveal a character card from their hand and play it for free. So on first glance, that seems like it could open up a lot of possibilities. Of course, having your opponent play a card from their hand for free could be kind of scary, because in theory they'll get to use theirs first on the following turn, since once it passes to their turn, their character is already going to be ready.
Unless it can be used. Rush, I guess.
But, of course, there are different things that, maybe you play a Maleficent Dragon off of this. As people have noted, then you get to banish potentially whatever your opponent chooses to play. Maybe you're playing a discard deck and they're actually out of a hand. So in that case, you're cheating out a character. But unless it costs, decently more than 5, you could just be playing the characters. So I do like the idea of using this in the Robin Hood deck, the red Robin Hood that lets you play 6 cost or less actions for free when you quest, if it's in the top 4. So that would be a nice way to all of a sudden get a lot of value by playing a character without having even spent any ink yet. So, it'll be fun to see how people choose to use this card, and I'm sure there's some cool deck ideas out there.
Yes, and now Thunderbolt, which I think is again an Amber Sapphire card geared toward that puppy deck, and I think this might really, take it over the top or make it have a chance of being viable. Wonder Dog. This is a 5-cost inkable 3/7 with 2 lore, and Puppy Shift 3. So first Puppy Shift we have seen. You can pay 3 to play it on top of one of your puppy characters, and it has Bodyguard. So, if you play one of those Dalmatian Tailwager puppies on 2 or any other puppy at your disposal, the ability to just shift this up on 3, and on turn 3 you have a 3/7 with 2 lore that also bodyguards and protects any other character you have in play. That could just be really good, and I think it takes a lot of stats to get through the 7 willpower, and it has 3 strength, so it will take out most early game threats that would attempt to challenge into this. So unless you had like Madam M. Fox and a crab or something to try to one-shot it that way, I mean, and that'll take some setup too on their end while you're being aggressive, dropping puppies in, maybe giving him ward with Perdita on the following turn. At least your puppy is not him, because this one's not a puppy, but I think that's really cool. And then just neat as well, the theme that these puppies that maybe look up to this action hero character can kind of level up and shift into him, and then protect all the rest of them. So I think this has potential to make puppies have some viability. And here's Toby.
Now we have Toby, who is not a puppy. He is a Storyborn ally. He's a dogged companion. He costs 1. He's uninkable. He has 3 strength, 1 willpower, and 1 lore. So it's basically a Felicia that doesn't have Reckless, that isn't inkable, but can quest. So you can kind of use this in your Ruby decks if you feel like you need to be answering boards in the early game, or potentially just saying, I'm going to quest this every turn, and feel free to banish your character into it. He might be an answer to that new Belle card potentially, if you are getting run over by Belle a lot and you want something that can remove her. Personally, I think there's probably better things we can be doing than playing this on turn 1. Just the uninkability, and it's not a great stat line against steel, easily removed by the common steel actions. So just being kind of unflexible in how you can play this card is a bit of a downside of it for me, but overall I think I
think you're happy to run it out on turn 1.
It's kind of nice that it can quest, compared to some of the other versions that were similar to this in the past.
Yeah, and there's been that Moana that's inkable 3/2, but she can't challenge if you need to unless you have a captain. So this kind of gives you the flexibility of both, but it's not inkable. So remains to be seen if it'll see play. But next up, Troubadour is a 2-cost inkable 1/3 with 1 lore and resist +1, and Singer 4. So very easy to compare this to the Ursula Vanessa card that is a 2-cost 1/4 without the resist, but otherwise it also has the Singer 4 and the 1 lore. I think if you're just looking for something that can sing a 4-cost song or above, like they both get the job done, I think the Ursula with the 4 willpower lets you set up better, potentially draw 3s with Rapunzel, since you can stack 3 damage on Ursula, whereas with this one you can't. And sometimes if you have to sing, let's say, let the Storm Mage on onto your own character to draw with Rapunzel, this one would only put 1 damage onto himself with that, and then you'd only draw 1 with Rapunzel if you were, relegated to doing such a suboptimal play. But sometimes that's all you got. So I think in that case, Ursula would shine more. But if you're just looking for something that you want to quest with and not be able to, be taken out by certain characters, this one, especially against ping damage too, will just be a little more sticky. So I guess it's whatever you're looking for. I might prefer the Ursula Vanessa myself.
I like the extra willpower on Ursula just to maybe heal 3 with Rapunzel.
Because they both get banished by Madam M. Fox. So I mean, there's certain thresholds here where maybe the resist +1 doesn't really come into play so much. So I think for the potential to draw more with Rapunzel, prefer the other. But this is cool too, and maybe in some decks you run both.
Next up, we have the twins themselves, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They are strange storytellers, and they cost 5. They are inkable, and they have 4 strength, 4 willpower, 2 lore, and the ability Another Recitation. Whenever this character quests, you may return chosen damaged character to their player's hand. So certainly this is playing into the Ruby Emerald theme of interacting with damaged units.
Mm-hmm.
So, really, I think if you're going to play that deck, you probably just want to go pretty much all in, try to get the effects to synergize and get the most value out of them. Happy to see them here. I think this was maybe the last card revealed from the core 204 cards in the set this time around for the reveal season. And of course, them being twins, we have to be a little extra excited about these. So happy to see them here.
In an earlier video, we had been trying to think of, famous Disney duos or, potential twin-like characters. And I mean, this was a pair that we had mentioned and weren't sure if they would ever appear in the game, but here we are in set 7. They're making an entrance. So.
And also, we're not going to dress as them, at the next DLC that we attend. So I'm just going to say that right now.
But I think it's cool too to see that, like with a card like this, they obviously made it to synergize well with the Queen of Hearts, which is from the same franchise, and also the Mad Hatter card as well. And there's a King of Hearts card in this set that says, opponents' damaged characters can't challenge your characters. So I think it's cool that they built in so much synergy. And lastly here, before we get into rapid fire with the enchantments that have been revealed so far, we have Yokai, the Intellectual Schemer. He's a 2-cost inkable 1/2 with 1 lore. So, not the best stat line for the cost, so he must have an effect, right? Yes, he does. It is Innovate. You pay 1 less to play characters using their shift ability. So this could set up earlier shifts than people might be expecting. Of course, they'll see him in play though, but it just helps you get to some of those top-end characters a little quicker, and it'll remain to be seen whether that is worth the trade-off in having to put this into play with his, subpar stat line and then hoping he sticks around. Otherwise, if he is removed, which might not be too difficult to do, then all of a sudden you're still that normal amount of turns away from your shift characters. And maybe you would have been better off just playing, a more well-statted character here, but I
think he's kind of like an alternative to a Tipo, in the
True,
blue-green deck.
Could.
He's almost like an extra ramp without ramping if you're going to play a shift character. And as the art on the card shows, it's almost like suggesting you to play Baymax right after this Yokai. So, it's pretty cool how you could either shift Baymax on your 1-drop or on top of Yokai on turn 3, and immediately have a 6-cost 5/5 in play. Also, what I like too is this would help you get your Hero Hamada out a turn earlier as well. So if you went right into the 3-cost hero, and then you could on turn 4 play the big shift one for 4 instead of shift 5, and then suddenly he has ward and evasive and is questing for 3, and then he's protected. And now anytime you shift again for the rest of the game, that character should be protected as well unless they can somehow remove hero. So I think there's potentially quite a strong deck that could be concocted for this ink pairing.
Yeah.
And I think Yokai is just a really interesting way to give you the ability to kind of ramp shift out more aggressively.
I think it'll just take some testing to figure out like which lines end up working out, in actual games, and which ones, sound good in theory but don't end up being good. So yeah, I'm really excited to get my hands on set 7. I know it's releasing early March, so not too far off now. Until then, yeah, we'll just be theory crafting and looking at deck lists. But it's cool. We've seen the full set, and again, this wasn't every card, but these are some of the highlights we think from the set. And
so
now
today they revealed some enchantments.
They did, and so we will just show briefly the 7 or so enchantments that were revealed today, and then I'm sure either tomorrow or the next day we might get to see the rest of them. But starting with this one, it is the Glass Slipper. So we didn't talk about this card, but you can only have 2 copies in your deck, and then you can banish this item and exert one of your prince characters to search your deck for a princess character card and reveal it to all players. Put that card into your hand and shuffle your deck. So a way to go grab a specific character. Maybe you want a Rapunzel, and this would allow you to go fetch one at the right moment. Lots of different princesses, but this art is looking phenomenal.
I think with the foiling on this, that that sparkly slipper is really going to sparkle even more. Yeah. And I think there's a pattern to notice with these enchanted so far. It almost looks like the ink has been really spread and kind of bled throughout the card. So almost like a paintbrush kind of went from the bottom to the top there in a little bit of a swirl pattern, and it has a nice mix of inks in there. I really like how that's looking. And
so far what's been revealed, we've seen a lot of non-character cards, and I really feel like, the Glass Slipper, it's really the focal point of this piece, and the light's really shining on it. So I think that's cool that they're highlighting it and drawing the attention there. Next one is...
Here is the Return of Hercules, which we did review the regular version earlier, but as a Hercules fan, I just find this is a card I'm definitely going to have to try to get my hands on in some way. I really,
a beautiful one.
I like the pose, and yeah, they've really just kind of zoomed in on Herc and Meg. I know in the other art, which is still a great art as well, they're a lot smaller, and in this one, they're like right in your face, so you get a lot of good character detail there, and you still see kind of how the colors are almost like smeared across from the bottom to the top.
And I think it's cool too, like when these Enchanteds, like this is clearly a very unique ability so far in the game that's much unlike anything else we've got so far. So I think it's cool when they highlight those types of abilities on cards and give them an enchanted treatment. Next up is the Devil's Eye Diamond, which is 2-cost inkable, and it has the Price of Power. You may exert this, and then if one of your characters was damaged this turn, gain a lore. So not sure, maybe in a challenge deck where you're doing a lot of challenging, you just use this as like, oh wow, I'm going to at least get some lore for the trouble after the end and slowly tick your way up if you're not questing.
I also think this could go in that green-red deck because if you have the queen down, and you play a character, it's coming in damaged, and then this is a lore every turn until they deal with that queen, or you have no more characters to play, so could synergize well there.
And the art, again, the diamond is shining, and is standing out very much against the backdrop, which is a very cool backdrop. It looks like it's on a pedestal of some sort with a stained glass window that looks like an owl in there. This is Archazia's island, and Archazia, is she an owl? Is she in an owl costume? I mean, nobody knows. But
And I've noticed there's a lot of these green bushes with some white flowers on some of these enchanted cards so far, so I'm interested to see kind of how many cards have something like that on them.
And there's been a lot of these scrolls,
yeah,
too.
I think it's probably one of the thought scrolls maybe that Archazia has, but
very cool. And next
to learn
up,
more about that. Now here we have Restoring Atlantis. So this is kind of like a cool scene from the Atlantis movie, but here it looks like it's almost recreated above Archazia's island because you see some of the towers there from presumably Archazia's castle or palace or whatever that is that we've seen in a lot of the cards. But very cool ability that we revealed earlier or talked about earlier, and I think the beams of light coming off her is really interesting in this art, and when it's foil I think it's going to be even more special.
Yeah, I think it's very cool. And then I think if you look with the buildings, and she's above all of those, and then you see the trees on this side, like they must be really tall to be towering over all of that. And so I think it just gives a really nice perspective. And then you've got the dark, spacey looking sky in the
and it almost looks like the bottoms of the buildings get a bit distorted behind the text box, almost like the paint or the ink was smeared again. So I really think it's cool what they're doing there.
And next up we have the Show Me More Enchanted, which is a 2-cost uninkable, and each player draws 3 cards. So this is an interesting one for playability wise, and I think art wise this is gorgeous, and definitely would be excited to open this one. And I think this card you could build your deck around in such a way that it might benefit you more than the opponent to draw 3 cards. If you can pull it off somehow, might see some play, especially if you're a really aggressive deck, I'm thinking. Or maybe, who knows, could be a mill strategy there too. We'll have to see.
I think the plants too, like they seem to be back on this card, the bushes with the white flowers, and I think they do a nice job of bracketing kind of the art around, like within it. So looks nice. And next up we have Enchanted Tamatoa. So not only do we think this card, could see a lot of play in the meta, but this being enchanted as well will just make him even more desirable. And it's a great looking art as well. It's very in your face. It's kind of a scary looking Tamatoa, the way he's opening his mouth.
It's so reminiscent of the movie, and he's looking directly out at us.
Yeah, and it almost looks like the 2 little orbs that are between his claws are sapphire and steel. So I don't know if they're suggesting we should play him in a sapphire steel deck. But, he does look pretty happy as a clam there, and I would be happy as a clam to open this card in one of my packs.
I love the coral formations down in the foreground, and then there's like a couple jellyfish looking creatures up top, maybe some bioluminescent animal life or sea life above him. And yeah, this is probably my favorite Enchanted I've seen so far from this set, at least. I think it's got it all going for it. Like, it looks like a really playable card, at least at first look, and then the art as well is phenomenal. And it's already legendary to begin with, so I think it's like the triple threat with this one, and it will probably be potentially the chase of the set, but we don't know. We haven't seen them all, and they're all looking good. But yeah, maybe my favorite so far. And here we have the Mad Hatter. This has been blown up a little bit because the only image I could find so far was partially obstructed.
We promise it'll look better in person.
But I do really like what I was seeing visually. I think the colors from the original picture I saw was more of an angled shot, and yeah, it was looking really nice. And again, they've got those flowers on these bushes showing up here, so it's very consistent across most of the Enchanted so far. So cool to see that. And
now we have Hiro Hamada. So important to note, this seems to be the one that you can open in your packs from this set. There's also a version we'll show you right after this that seems to be for the next round of set championships, is what is expected. But for now, this one is looking very cool. As we said, we think this could be a quite strong card for Emerald Sapphire. And here Hiro looks like he's really busy at work trying to make sure that he's designing things just right, to bring you a victory. So looks like a nice addition to your Sapphire Emerald deck, if that is something you are interested in playing next set.
And I sure am excited to do so. Here we go. This is what you can presumably win at the set championships for the next set. And this is, that same card, but with a different art. So again, different look at Hiro. Very cool. It looks like they've really blended the sapphire and emerald colors into the background, and it seems to be some sort of water kind of either encapsulating him or circling around him in the back there.
This seems like more of an action pose compared to the one we saw previously.
Reminds me of the super goofy Enchanted pose with the outstretched hand like that. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it should be cool. And then the other thing to note is that if you are participating in the set championships, but you do not, make top 8 and get the foil variant, this is the participation promo version of Hiro Hamada, and you can see it's in the more traditional black border, around the card. It's not like full art, but you still get a piece of the fun. Something to show that you went, you played, and you hopefully had a fun time.
Yeah, and I like this card. I think the power level, it really seems like there's potential there. I'm excited to try a deck based around this, and yeah, it's essentially normally a super rare card. So to get this just for going, that's really nice because there hasn't been a participation promo yet. So I think it's a cool move that Ravensburger has made with the organized play program, and yeah, I'm excited.
So it looks like there's almost like 5 different versions of this Hiro Hamada, because you could get the classic one, you could get it in foil, and then you can get the enchanted one out of the pack, and the enchanted one from the set champs, and the participation one. So you can't even play them all in your deck, at the same time. But
a lot for the collectors out there.
For sure.
Well, that was maybe a little long-winded. It was more so that we just packed a lot into this first episode. So going forward, we are going to try to, keep it more condensed, I would say. But if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Yes, we've had a lot of fun going over these cards, and there's many more cards in the set too to be looked into and explored when the set releases.
Yeah, there was certainly a lot to cover, but we were just, we're very excited to keep our excitement for Lorcana alive, and that's easy to do because they make a great game.
Yeah, we love
at Ravensburger, and each set just brings more and more ways to to think about different strategies and to play some of your favorite characters. And I know there's ones coming out in the future that I'm very excited for, like Pocahontas and the Black Cauldron, and then Pixar next year. So
yeah, a
lot to look forward to. But until next week, when we hope to bring you some more content, we thank you for watching this far.
Yes, if you want to, hit the like button if you enjoyed it, feel free. But yeah, we enjoyed making this video, and we are hoping to release videos every Thursday as part of this Lorcana Twins talk. So Lorcana Twins are going to be talking on Thursday. So at least that's the plan. So yes, thanks for making it this far. We really appreciate it. And yeah, until next time, happy questing.